All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Allen Ulrich, here with Bob Rose tonight. Sean has the real world pulling him in tonight, so he's got to do some work this evening. I know what it's like. I got work I got to do after this show tonight. So,
Same.
how's it going tonight, Bob?
Not bad, not bad. Just the dog days of summer are approaching. Both literally and figuratively. If you're,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a football fan. But listen, if you're a fan of a certain team, you don't want to hear news because any news you hear out of your team, in this case, obviously the New Orleans Saints, 99% of it is bad. When you're in the media, like Alan and myself, no news is still good news because we are fans, but no news is frustrating because you kind of scrounge to come up with topics to write about or talk about on shows such as this.
Absolutely. I mean, what did I say after the mini camp? You know, the best Saints news is no Saints news, and we actually have good news and bad news tonight from the Saints. Good news is they extended Demario Davis, and I mean, of any player, I think that deserves a contract extension, Demario Davis certainly fits the bill. Let me ask you this: where would you rank Demario Davis in the all-time Saints linebacker group? I know it's hard because it's like, okay, if I say top 5, okay, so we got the 4 Dome Patrol members, and then where do we go? So where would you rank him?
This is going to cause some ire from older Saints fans because listen, I mean, even outside of the Dome Patrol, you had very, very good linebackers like Mark Fields, Kevin Mitchell, certainly Jonathan Vilma. They all come to mind. I think of the 3 I just mentioned, Vilma is the only one in the franchise Hall of Fame. But they were all multiple Pro Bowl players. But this is what's going to cause the controversy. And folks, I love the Dome Patrol. I grew up on the Dome Patrol. But to me, Demario Davis is at least number 4. And I might even put him at number 3.
Who are you dropping off?
As you choke.
Yeah.
Well,
top 3 is tough. Top 3 is tough, but go ahead.
And that's why I think ultimately I would go, with my top 3 as certainly Ricky Jackson, number 1. And this is where it also causes controversy. I go Pat Swilling at number 2, followed very closely by Sam Mills at number 3. And I could be swayed for arguments either way. But I put Demario Davis slightly above Vaughn Johnson. Because I loved Vaughn Johnson. I really did. He was one of my favorite players, period, in the NFL growing up. But to me, Demario is a better athlete. Now, I realize you're comparing eras and essentially a different game altogether. But Demario Davis's game translates better to that era than Vaughn Johnson's would to this era. And that's why I put, Vaughn would probably be a 2-down player. A run stuff is straight ahead linebacker, goal line, short yardage, and early down situations. Demario, and we know how good he is there. I know he's a bit undersized. But he's a spectacular run defender, but he is just as good. And he's a great blitzer too. But people don't give him enough credit for how good he was in coverage. Now, Vaughn Johnson was very good in coverage too. Him and Mills both extremely heady, knew their zone responsibilities very well, and had great ball skills. Demario Davis is the type of athlete that you could put on some slot receivers and any NFL tight end or running back, man on man, and even down the field. And it's because of Davis's athleticism, how his game translates to any era, and the fact that he can do so much more things at an elite level. That's why I put him, right in the top 4 with the Dome Patrol.
Yeah, it is tough because Demario Davis has 2 All-Pro in the 4 years he's been in the Saints, been named 2 times All-Pro. Ricky Jackson, Sam Mills, both Hall of Famers. Pat Swilling was Defensive Player of the Year.
And the biggest Hall of
91.
Fame snub in the NFL to this day, if you ask me.
So where do you fit him in there? Vaughn Johnson. Vaughn Johnson's my brother's favorite member of the Dome Patrol. And I always think about what Jim Morris says. You take those four guys, you can look at them, and you say, pick out the linebacker. Vaughn Johnson fit the bill for the build, the look, even his head. Looked like a linebacker. That's the thing. And the thing I like about Vaughn Johnson, of course, is he was a physical player. I mean, Sam Mills rocked you good, but Vaughn Johnson, he hit old school, and then he stood over you and did that kind of thing. And, I think about the 91 Saints 49ers game, the one Steve Walsh started in San Francisco, and Vaughn Johnson screaming, it's fourth down, 4th and goal from the 1 foot line. And he's screaming at the 49ers bench, yo, come on, go for it. I dare you, go for it. Show me you're a man, go for it. And it was man to man. And not only is he the one screaming at the sideline, he's the one that makes the tackle to stop them from scoring. I mean, it's just, so that's hard. For me, that's why it's so hard for me to, if you could count the Dome Patrol as one unit, right, and say that number one, then it's so easy to say, okay, Demario's 2. Because
you put him ahead of Vilma?
I would put him ahead of Vilma now, because Vilma was probably, next to Sam Mills, probably the smartest linebacker we ever had on this team. And that's not to knock Joe Fetterspiel and all the linebackers we've had over the years. It's just his knowledge of the game was so complete. The issue I had with Vilma, and it's not really an issue because he had no control over that, but his injuries. You really got the 2009 year out of him. You got 2008, 2009, and then the injuries started happening in 2010 and 2011. When he was out there, he made an impact. But then, after those first 2 years, he kind of tails off. So by 2012, he's pretty much done. And 2013, he's barely even playing. Whereas Demario Davis has been 4 years with the Saints and 4 years of consistent great linebacker play, and as I said, 2 years all pro. It's amazing. He's over 30, so he hasn't shown that sign of slowing down.
No,
like you see players that are not quarterbacks or kickers hit that wall at 30 and start slowing down or start getting injured. And it's just, knock on wood here, but that's what really, and I think he's the lead. I think he's the face and leader of this team. I really do. To me, the person who leads the chant that Drew Brees used to lead, it's not Alvin Kamara. It's not Jameis Winston. It's not any other player, but not even Cam Jordan. It's Demario Davis. So he is his face. His face, his body of work is just, to me, that's when you think of the Saints, you think of Demario Davis. At least I do.
I completely agree with that. And Cam is a team leader right up there with Davis. But I think that Davis is the voice of this entire team. Certainly the defensive unit. Cam is the voice of the defensive line. He is kind of the media face of the team, if you will, which is slightly different. But I think the mantle of that team leadership was sort of turned over to Demario Davis, even in 2019. When Brees went down with that thumb injury. Brees is obviously still the face of the team and all that, but somebody had to take charge as the on-field team huddle leader, and it was instantly Davis, which surprised me at the time. I expected it to be Cam because it's not like Cam's not a vocal guy.
No.
But there didn't seem to be any question among the team and the team's hierarchy that mantle was automatically passed to Davis. And even when Brees came back, Brees, if you're going to describe it in like a king or a presidential term,
Mm-hmm.
Breeze was almost a figurehead from there on out. Still a very important voice in the huddle, obviously, but the intensity leader of that team from the time Breeze went down with that thumb injury belonged to Demario Davis up to and from then and including today.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that because, you look at the press conferences after a game, who are the people that come out there and speak? And Demario Davis is right there behind or around when Alvin Kamara comes out. Cam Jordan will come out too, because Cam's always good for an interview, but it's Demario Davis. I mean, it really is. He is, to me, he is the leader of the Saints right now. And where Demario Davis takes that team and he drives that, and this is a defensive team too. That's the other thing. We for years it was always the offense. That's why I think Drew Brees, aside from Drew Brees' natural greatness, this was a team that was focused around the offense. Peyton was an offensive coach. They were an explosive offense, and as we know from 2012 to 2017, I mean, the defense was just terrible, except for the 1 year in 2013. So yeah, naturally, it is all about the offense. But that, like you said, that thumb injury. But in 2018, where the team started to change its personality and the defense started really stepping up in 2017, 2018, I think that's where you really saw a marked difference in the leadership hierarchy.
Yeah.
And now that Malcolm Jenkins is gone, I think, Demario Davis is even more the focal of this team. So that's the good news. The bad news is stories are starting to trickle out. We've talked about this before. The bad news in this case is that, they're floating out what the possible punishment may be for Alvin Kamara for what happened in Vegas. 6 games is about what I expected. And we have talked about this. I said my biggest fear isn't the 6 games. It's when that 6-game suspension occurs. And, he's got a court date hearing. I don't remember anymore. I know it's in August, but is it like August?
I think it's August 1st, Alan, but I know it's in the first couple of days.
Yeah. And I think that if there's a continuance again, or that they set a trial date, that just pushes the discipline further down the line. And that's when I start getting really concerned, because when does that punishment happen? If that punishment happens in, say, week 6, week 7, we're talking about the Bengals game now, we're talking about the Raiders game around that time. And I said, that's the challenging part of the schedule, especially when you got to play the Rams and the 49ers back to back. That can really hurt us. So what is your take on this? What do you think may or may not happen?
Well, I mean, first of all, just like you said, Alan, the NFL personal conduct policy for players and coaches and executives, it is laid out pretty clear. And for this type of infraction, the baseline suspension is 6 games. There are 2 things that worry me about that. One, is that the commissioner's office and oh hell, and I feel like I've used this before, but the real catalyst to the beginning of World War I, Roger Goodell,
he shot the Duke.
Yes, shot the Archduke, and sunk the Lusitania at the same time. But the commissioner's office reserves the right to uphold, reduce, or lengthen, or even overturn a suspension based off of, despite the personal conduct policy. And I say it that way because of 2 reasons. Number one, Goodell's hatred for the Saints. But number 2, the Desean Watson situation.
Yeah,
It's a
I was
PR
wondering
nightmare
that.
for the entire league that's going to have a trickle down effect. And in my opinion, I believe that the ultimate consequence is going to be that other players' infractions, even if they aren't nearly on the same magnitude, even if they aren't even in the same realm of an offense, I worry that other players are going to be made an example of, and it's going to be a league-wide crackdown on discipline, a sort of Nazi gazpacho,
Gestapo.
Nazi,
Gestapo.
Gestapo. Thank you.
Mm.
I don't know why I say gazpacho. That's a
You,
soup, isn't it?
yeah, close enough.
Uh, um, but I mean, you guys get what I'm saying, and I mean,
Yeah.
that's I'm trying to say, keep my conspiracy theories tongue in cheek and in a joking manner. But my worry about the league coming down harsher on discipline for even baseline offenses, that's a legitimate worry. Now, if you're going to take good news out of this, it's like you pointed out. Kamara's hearing, and this is just a preliminary hearing too.
Mm-hmm.
It's been postponed twice. And all indications are that Alvin Kamara is going to court over this and is pleading not guilty. So if he maintains that plea, without knowing what the exact prosecution evidence is, other than the public video that is out there, this court case could carry well on into the regular season. And there's even a possibility that Alvin Kamara doesn't end up serving a suspension at all during the 2022 season. Let's make no mistake. He's not dodging this, but he's going to get suspended once the dust to all this settles. It's just a question and a concern of when it settles. And
You make it with a spatula too. You need a spatula to make that.
But yeah, it's just a question of when the dust settles and how severe the commissioner's office wants to be.
Well, let's look at the other guy who's in the news for a suspension, Desean Watson. We've had 2 grand jury convene, and they both came back with no bill, meaning they didn't have a charge. They couldn't file charges. However,
unbelievable to me, by the way, but
well, I think for the grand jury, it was a lack of evidence, and it becomes he said, she said. So I think, unless some massage parlor person pulls up a blue dress, you're not going. It's going to be hard to provide physical evidence of sexual encounters.
yeah.
But they have 5 women who, and 2 of them have been part of the grand jury's hearings. But the league is looking specifically at 5 women. Now, this is a difference for me between what Kamara is going through and what Watson's going through. Watson allegedly has settled with 20 of these women.
Yeah.
So in the league's mind, that's an admission of guilt.
As it should be.
Yeah. And that's my fear with Kamara, these hearings. If Kamara pleads no contest or takes some sort of deal, so this doesn't go to trial, to quote unquote get it over with, that's when the league discipline kicks in. And I think that's what you're going to see happen with Desean Watson, when people going, well, wait a minute. They've had 2 grand juries. Both of them had no bill, which they won't say that because most people don't know that. But
right.
They'll say he was found not guilty. And the issue is that he is, in the league's mind, he's admitting some level of guilt. And the league also can punish you for damaging the shield.
Right.
And Watson and now Kamara too are damaging the shield because they got caught in these situations that makes the league look bad. And that's why I think Watson, for example, is going through. Here we go. This is out of Seinfeld. Do you have 24 of these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,
Nice.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I think he got 18 before he ran out of space. But yeah.
He's not counting the ones that were settled.
That's right. But yeah, it's it's damaging the credibility of the league.
Yeah.
It's a bad PR thing. So that's when the discipline can come into play. I think in Kamara's case, though, the league wants to wait until the court case is over with
Yeah.
before they issue the punishment. Whereas with Watson, and it sounds like it's going to be an indefinite suspension. And look, I was one of the, I admit it, you can go look at the archives. I was one of the ones on this show who said, listen, I get these bad charges, but I didn't blame the Saints for taking a shot at him. I kept saying over and over again, I did not want to give up as much as we're going to have to give up for him. And I'm glad we didn't.
Certainly.
And we also said that if the Saints sign him, the hammer is coming down even harder. It's kind of surprising that, they're already talking about indefinite suspension with Cleveland, but Cleveland's also trying to figure out a way of getting out of this. They're already floating out. Well, we put things in the contract that if he violates personal conduct, we can recoup the money. I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, 230 guaranteed. That's what sticks in my head.
Yeah,
230 guaranteed. He's getting all 230 million. I don't care what your void saying your contract.
Yep. Considering the fact that they offered him this contract with 24 known allegations already on the table. In medical terms, folks, that's called a pre-existing condition, which trumps all insurance settlements whatsoever. So, that brings a little bit of legalese into this conversation.
Sure.
I don't see, the Browns took a big gamble, and obviously more ways than one when they pursued and got Desean Watson. And to me, they made that gamble knowing the risk, because again, these were known allegations that was on the table. I mean, Desean Watson, hasn't played football in a year. The Houston Texans kicked him out of the building because they didn't want anything to do with these allegations. So, the Cleveland Browns knew this. They gave up the draft choices, the capital, and the money. Black and white on paper, Desean Watson signed the contract. The Cleveland Browns signed the contract. Tough luck, buddies. That's why you're the Browns.
Yeah. I just, it makes Cleveland look even stupider. I can, if that's possible. Like I said, I like the Saints being aggressive and trying to get this guy, but I'd be really pissed off if first I was going to be pissed off they gave up that many first round picks, but secondly, I was really going to be pissed off you guaranteed all that kind of money, so you screwed your cap and you screwed all your debt, and they're just laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, the Texans will probably blow those picks,
right? Because they're the Texans. They're the South Browns,
right? So you have two incompetent organizations working together here. I just wish this could have been the Falcons.
I know.
Sorry, it would be even funnier if it was the Falcons. I mean, just the endless trolling. So, and that's all I really wanted to talk about with Desean Watson. It's just because Kamara is also facing possible suspension. I just wanted to kind of put both of those out there, just to show you that it's not just William Randolph Hearst's number one enemy, the man who sank the USS Maine to start the Spanish-American War. So we got Cuba, Roger Goodell. Little history all thrown in there.
Right.
But if you don't know who William Randolph Hearst is, he was the man who was very pro-war. And he pushed for the Spanish-American War, and he would use, back then they used to call it yellow journalism, but it was sensational journalism.
Yeah.
And he was the one that was really fired up about the sinking of the USS Maine, mysterious sinking in the harbor in Cuba. And that kind of launched the war, and you felt bad because, I mean, as a historian, you feel bad because Spain was a crumbling empire. They had nothing left. This was the last of one of the few Spanish possessions in the New World, and the United States just basically got empire building and kicked the hell out of Spain and took all the remaining colonies. But that was Teddy Roosevelt. He wanted a great war. He wanted to build an empire. If Cleveland doesn't swoop in with this incredible deal, is Watson a Saint or a Falcon?
He's a Falcon.
I think so too. I really do, just simply because I don't think the Saints are going to would have given him the kind of money he was looking for.
Exactly.
Not the guaranteed money. They could give him the contract, but they weren't going to give him the guaranteed money. So I think the Falcons probably get him because they needed a star on that team. They really do. I mean, you look at that team right now. Who's the star player on that team?
You gotta say Kyle Pitts, only because of what he accomplished last year. If not Pitts, then their top draft choice this year, Drake London. Which means you're making the face of the franchise a non-quarterback who hasn't even played a football game for you yet.
Yeah, AJ Terrell is the only other person I can think of. It's probably the star on that team. I mean, even the former LSU Tiger, number 45, Desean Jones, he probably is on his way out because he doesn't fit the kind of defense they want. You know, because he fits, what Quinn wanted, the smaller, faster players, not big physical guys. I think Arthur Blank wants more of a physical team. So,
and I agree with you. As I said, I think hypothetically, I think Watson would have ended up being a Falcon too. And this is also why I don't believe the Saints were as close to getting Desean Watson as what some people think. The Falcons were just they blindfolded themselves at the top of the diving board without even knowing that there was any water in the pool, exactly like the Browns did. The Saints were doing their due diligence, and I think with a player of Watson's talent on the football field, you have to do your due diligence if he's available. But I think at the end of the day, I agree with you. I don't think that Mickey Loomis or Gail Benson would have agreed to such high guaranteed money. I think the Saints would have fought against giving up not so much the draft capital as much as any proven players on the roster. And I think the Texans, when it came to the Saints, and you were hearing that the Carolina Panthers were also involved. I think from those two rosters, Houston wanted players in addition to draft picks. And that's where I see the Saints probably being resistant. And again, the Saints are an exponentially smarter organization than the Falcons have. At least, they certainly have been since 2006. Unlike Cleveland did, and unlike Atlanta was probably going to do, New Orleans would have undoubtedly, no doubt in my mind, would have included language in not only Watson's contract, but maybe even the trade itself that would have voided to some extent, if not all, if Watson was not able to take the field for, say, a full calendar season. That it's for those reasons why I don't think New Orleans was nearly as much in play as what a lot of people believe.
I agree with that. I think they're not giving him that kind of guaranteed money. It's funny you mentioned Carolina. Well, Carolina was the team that everyone assumed he was going to go to because Clemson is in the same market. So he's technically coming home. Carolina was in the market for just about every quarterback that was out there. And that coach needs a star quarterback to save his job. They've already got a big contract with Sam Darnold, so that would have limited what they were going to do. Then imagine giving up all those draft picks and probably players. You got to think that the Texans wanted at least one of their defensive players.
Yep.
And
that's what I was hearing.
And probably somebody like Jeremy Chin.
Mm-hmm.
And probably wanted at least an offensive weapon they would have dangled out Christian McCaffrey, but I don't know if the Texans are stupid enough to do that. But
Right.
I could see them going after maybe a receiver like DJ Moore,
Mhm.
one of those kind of guys. But Carolina just didn't have the money either because they signed Donald to a big contract. Now you're talking about bringing in another quarterback with a big contract in there. That's too much money tied up
Yep.
in one player. And Carolina's already got enough problems. Their former owner had issues too, and
Mhm.
that was part of the reason why he had to sell the team. So it's almost like Watson going to Washington. What I mean? It's not a good place to go to. And I think that's why they were eliminated rather early.
Yep.
Washington would have been a perfect place to go for Watson to go. You got a sleazy owner and Dan Snyder with the cheerleader scandal. Yeah, I could imagine what that would have looked like with Watson in there too.
It would have been a
So,
fun storyline to follow.
oh, absolutely, and they're already in trouble because people hate the name the Commanders.
Right.
So it's just, and I can't help but think that they got the Commanders name only because they had that guy who trademarked every possible name they could have used, and they didn't want to pay that guy. That's
Yep.
what was so hilarious because they were going to call them the Red Tails, or they were going to call them something, referring to Tuskegee Airmen, something like that. That's where they were going to go with this name, and he just. Yeah, I don't disagree, Calvin. I still don't understand the thinking behind that. I mean, and that mascot. Have you ever seen the mascot, the King Cake Baby mascot? It shows up. This
Yeah.
thing terrifies kids over at the for the Pelicans games.
Hell with kids. That terrifies me just looking at the picture.
It's like if I wanted to make a horror film about Mardi Gras in New Orleans, that's the villain. That is what the killer is dressed like. Just
You need to trademark that as soon as we get off of the show. Otherwise, it's going to pop up. That's going to be the next summer thriller, and you're going to miss out on millions.
Mardi Gras. Murder at Mardi Gras. Well, for most New Orleanians, like, oh, somebody got shot on the parade route again. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, yeah. It just the names that they come up with nicknames for teams. It just really it. I don't know what happened to all the creativity. In the 60s, in the 50s, it seems like all the great nicknames came about, and some in the 70s too. But the great nicknames for sports teams and the great nicknames for players, that they're all gone now. I mean, if you think, I'd have to. He said, I've never seen the Baby Cakes mascot. Yeah,
Google it, JGP.
Yeah,
but not at bedtime.
Right, Google King Cake Baby Pelicans, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This thing is terrifying. Basically, the mascot from the Happy Death Day movie. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they paid somebody money. They paid somebody money for that name too. The Zephyr, the Baby Cakes name. That's what was most appalling. Well, the Zephyrs, that was the old name, and we're going into baseball now. The Zephyrs, that was the old name when they were the I forgot where they came from. But that when they were the AAA franchise that moved to New Orleans, they were the Zephyrs, and people liked it because the best ride or the most popular ride at Old Pontchartrain Beach was the Zephyr. It was a big old wooden roller coaster. It had been around since 1940. So people like me who are old and remember the Pontchartrain Beach, yeah, you're good with the Zephyrs. So, Yeah, and that was the thing. Minor league teams had weird names. So they thought it would be kind of, let's come up with a weird name for them.
Hmm.
And it just, it sounded like something you'd see at a Disney film, for some kind of football movie where this mythical team from like the movie Gus. I can't believe we are talking about the movie Gus in this thing. But for those of you who were not around in the dark days of the 70s, Disney films, live action films, there's a movie with a donkey that can kick field goals named Gus. And he played for the something Adams, and Don Knotts was the head coach. So
Hmm.
this film's terrible already. This whole pitch job was terrible. And Bob Crane was in this movie, and it's one of Bob Crane's few movies that he did, and it's right before he died. But Bob Crane and Johnny Unitas play the announcers for this team, and my brother should be chiming in any minute now because
I was just looking down.
I know he and I saw this horrible movie. It's on Disney Plus.
It is.
And I actually tried to put it on and watch a little bit of it and say, okay, let's just see if it was really as bad as I remember it being.
And it is. I've seen it.
It's worse. It's worse. But yeah, that's Johnny Unitas and Bob Crane appear in this movie as the announcers for, it's like the not Anaheim, but some town in California, Adams, and they're playing NFL teams. And so here comes a donkey dressed in a jersey, which looks about as ridiculous as you think it is, with a helmet on, coming out to kick field goals. And the owner sits behind this donkey because, of course, he kicks him backwards, and he kicks the ball, and he's like Tom Dempsey, 63-yard field goals are no problem. So, yeah. One day we have to do a show about the best football movies, because somebody asked me that one time, what's the best football movie? It's hard because they're either completely ridiculous, and there have been two Saints movies, by the way. Number one, that came out in 1969 with Charlton Heston, and then it was that movie that came out, and we're not even going to talk about the Sean Payton movie, but the movie that came out off of Disney with one of the Wayans brothers. I watched it, and it was like blue screen football footage. I mean, blue screen of him mixed in with like actual NFL football footage. It's terrible, but he's a Saints quarterback. Yeah, Gus, King Kang Baby, and Gestapo on your bingo card tonight. You just won. The only thing missing is the Apple Dumpling Gang. That's about where we are right now with this. That's it. A saintly switch with David Allen Greer. That's it. And he wasn't one of the Wayman brothers. He was but he was on In Living Color. He played the two guys with two snaps. I just can't. Yeah, I can't think of the whole routine, but yeah,
real men on this subject or that subject,
and they would sit there and they would like play there, and one of the Wayne brothers was the bald-headed one, and David Allen Greer was the one with the hair, and
and I'm going to do this. It's going to live in infamy, but Roger Goodell hated him.
Well, one of the things they like to do when they would do the football stuff, they talk about the uniforms.
Yes.
And Erksleben was the ass end of the donkey. Saintly Switch was done in memory of Dave Waymer and produced by his first wife. Thank you. I did not know that. I just remember trying to watch it, and number one is almost as bad. Men on Film, yes, yeah. I used to love In Living Color.
Me too.
That was a unique TV show. You probably couldn't do it today.
No.
But it just, Jim Carrey got his debut in that group, so it was just, they would poke fun at Black culture, but they'd also poke fun at popular culture. And that's what really made it unique, because I remember there was a couple of skits I really remember. One of them was one of the Wayman brothers was supposed to be Billy D. Williams.
Yes.
He was advertising malt liquor.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
I mean,
And
that was that. Obviously, Jim Carrey's Fire Marshal Bill,
Fire Marshal Bill,
Homie the Clown.
Homie the Clown, Homie don't play
Yeah,
that.
the drunk bum that always found himself. I forget the name, the character's name, but the drunk homeless bum that was always in high class social situations and ruined everything.
Hmm.
The men on film, men on whatever. The two guys in both. I think they were both the Wayans brothers selling stolen merchandise at out of the back of the truck
Yeah.
on TV. I mean, I
One
could
of
go
my
on and on.
one of my favorites was, and I think it's Damon Williams. He's the guy in jail, and he tries to use all the big words, and of course he uses the
Yeah,
wrong
yeah,
words. And he's talking, and he says, "So I told the defense that I circumspect, excuse me, circumcised the prediction of the situation." And you're like, well, what the fuck? He'd be so exact. And he'd say,
uh-huh.
excuse me, I misspoke. I would have tears coming out of my eyes. I was
Yep.
laughing so hard because he'd always misuse the wrong word and inject a sexual term instead.
Yes.
And it made it even funnier. No, the Adventures of Handyman could not
No,
happen. There's so
I
much
forgot
that could
about
not
that
happen.
one, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, Here we go. Two movies deal with the super. 2-minute warning. Sniper hides in upper parts of the dome. That was roughly based off, believe it or not, the sniper that was on Howard Johnson in the
Hmm.
early 70s. But I know the other movie he's getting ready to mention. And I think about it every time I go in the dome because it is that cold. But the Killer Bees movie.
Yes.
Not the Swarm. I think it's just called Killer Bees. But yeah, they have to drive. Yeah, Savage Bees. There we go. Where a girl drives a red Volkswagen Beetle because allegedly they were attracted to red, covered in bees, in the Superdome, parks in the
Hmm.
middle of the stadium, and they just plummet the air conditioner to drive all the bees to hibernation. And I can't tell you, but it is. I mean, I can tell you that the Superdome is that cold.
It can be.
Yeah. Um, yeah, like a typical Saints home game. Exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah. So so there's a lot of movies that are filmed, football movies that are filmed in the Super. Was Where did Jamie Foxx come from? Did he come from Kids in the Hall, or did he
He,
come from A Living Color?
he, I don't know. Uh,
Uh,
I don't know.
I I I know of Kids in the Hall. I didn't
Yeah,
watch it because
I wasn't a fan.
That was old Comedy Central, but they would advertise it because the show I did watch on Comedy Central way back when was Mystery Science Theater 3000,
Yeah.
which I loved, and I loved when they would pick on soap operas, public service films, and science films and things like that. The things they did on there, where you got Tom Servo, you've got um, uh, I can't think of Crow. They would sit there and just rip into these movies. It was hilarious. So yeah, Keenan Ivory Williams. Okay, I
Okay.
got you. Yeah, all right, all right, that's right. Okay. But that was just such a classic show, and that's when Fox had just started, and
Hmm.
they were the edgy network, and that was a good example of how they were the edgy
Hmm.
network back then. Um, yeah, In Living Color was just a great show that I really enjoyed. Kind of like watching old Arsenio Hall episodes. I enjoyed Arsenio Hall, the first series he did. When he tried to come back, it wasn't nearly as good.
No.
Um, in fact, towards the end of his run, he was already it was getting dated. It wasn't nearly as. And when he first came on, it was so different. With the crowd all into it. Ooh, 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 that whole bit. I mean, it was so different from back then. You think about it was Johnny Carson near the end of his run. There was just no late night television that was like for the younger people, I
Right.
guess. Yeah. That is right. I completely forgot about that.
And I knew the Wanda
Man.
character. I didn't realize it was him. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, she was a dancer.
Yes.
Yes, I do know that. Jennifer Lopez was one of the dancers because they'd have the DJ. He was the Asian guy. It was a DJ.
Hmm.
I just say that because I do not remember his name.
Yeah. It's
Sorry, just who he was. There was a mostly an all black cast except for Jim Carrey and then
hmm
the Asian guy who's a DJ, and then you had the girls dancing between segments. You know,
the
and
Fly
then
Girls.
yeah, the Fly Girls. Thank you. Boy.
Those were my formative years, and I'll just leave it at that.
Oh man. Well, that was the end of my college years. Yeah, the late '80s was the end of my college years when that show came on. Um, hell, we're at the point now we could start talking about silk stockings and shows like that were on late night television. Bringing it back to the Saints, though.
Yes, please.
And we will talk one night about movies, just football movies in general, because that's there's so many of them and it's tough. So with training camp now roughly 3.5 weeks away, I thought it'd be a good time for us to do kind of a breakdown on who do we think is going to make the final roster. Now, obviously, preseason hasn't started yet. Training camp hasn't started, and guys that we might list today probably won't even be on the roster come the first game in September. But I mean, the obvious things are, like quarterbacks. Who's your 3 quarterbacks going to make this team?
I actually think they're just going to keep 2.
Do you?
I do. Assuming Jameis Winston's knee progresses how it looks like it's going to, and Andy Dalton is your experienced backup, I think Ian Book has to play his way onto the roster rather than play his way off of. A lot of people automatically assume that the Saints are going to keep 3. I don't assume that. I certainly think it's possible Book could win the job, but like I said, he has to win a job. I very much see a scenario where Book doesn't shine enough to make Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael say, we need to keep him on the active roster. I think Book would ultimately be released with the intention of bringing him back on the practice squad. That way they could elevate him if they needed him, knock on wood. But the way this roster is constructed, and you'll see what my logic is too as we go down some of these positions. You know the way I think, Alan, so already know why I'm thinking this. But I think they just keep 2 ideally, and they're hoping to bring Book back on the practice squad.
And I can see that logic because I agree with you. It's how do you get to your 53? Right now, I'm going to stick with 3 quarterbacks, but I can agree with you and see that Book could get put on the practice squad if they think they can sneak him through, only because here we go. Only because they may need that roster spot somewhere else. And, the next issue we're going to talk about running backs. How many running backs do you want to keep? I mean, obviously, we both see Winston and Dalton being your 1-2. With whether or not Book makes the team, depends on how many you're going to keep, how many running backs you're going to keep, how many offensive linemen, how many linebackers you keep. That's where the numbers game comes into play. So running backs then, who do you see making this roster in running backs?
The only spots I think are guaranteed are obviously Kamara and Mark Ingram. I think that this is a position that unless somebody really jumps up and grabs a spot, This is a position that could have a lot of moving parts at the back half of the depth chart based off of other teams' releases, potential veteran signings late in camp, based off of the depth chart now as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
I like Abram Smith. I realize we have not seen him in a single game of action yet, but I like his tape coming out of Baylor. And I give Abram Smith a slight nod based off of what I know over Tony Jones, Divine Ozigbo. And I think Dwayne Washington, as much as I'd like to see them keep Abram Smith and either Jones or Ozigbo, I think that Dwayne Washington will probably have a job for another year because of his special teams ability. But then here's where it gets interesting. And, you and I have talked about this many times. It doesn't matter whether you love the potential of Abram Smith, whether you love the potential of Tony Jones, whether you love the potential of Divine Ozigbo. All three of those players have the same P word attached to it because they either haven't played an NFL game or are unproven in a young NFL career. That's a big gamble to take when you're talking about an aging Mark Ingram and a suspended Alvin Kamara. I just saw the comment, Taysom Hill, he'll be listed as a tight end. He'll see more reps out of the backfield than he will at tight end, though. I guarantee you that. Yeah. And I think that plays a factor in this position. In my original 53-man projection, which I did back in the middle of May, so obviously I'll do another one for training camp, I had them keeping Kamara, Ingram, Abram Smith, and Dwayne Washington. I didn't even have them keeping a fullback, Adam Prentice, because that's where I think Taysom Hill could be used also. So I have them going in with 4 backs.
That's interesting because you answered my question. I was getting ready to ask you. Is Prentice going to be the starting fullback on this team? Because there's very few teams that use fullbacks anymore.
Right.
And sadly, my favorite fullback in the league, unfortunately, plays for the 49ers. And we can't get rid of they can't get this guy from them. So I don't know if Prentice is going to be the fullback. They could use an H-back situation here, because that was a Peyton thing. And Peyton has been looking since 2009 for another Heath Evans. That was probably his favorite fullback of all the fullbacks his team's ever had, just because he wanted a guy who could block, who can run short yardage, and can swing out the backfield and catch the ball very well. So he has tried a lot of fullbacks, and Zach Lyme was probably one of my favorites.
Mine too, and I like Michael Burton.
Yeah, and I liked who was the kid that we got from Green Bay at the end of his career?
John Kuhn. Yeah, I liked him too.
I like John Kuhn a lot. And Jay Collins was good.
Yeah.
Jay Collins was good. But, I like more of a bulldozing fullback who can occasionally catch the ball without looking like he's fighting it.
Right.
And I just don't see that on this roster. And I've been waiting for another one of those kind of fullbacks, with the old, he needs to wear the old school pads. He needs to look a little like, what was his name from the Buccaneers, number 40. Allstott. I want a guy who looks like Mike Allstott. I want to see the huge shoulder pads with the neck brace behind there. I want to see a guy who comes out there and he's about 6'2" and about 250, solid muscle, Lorenzo Neal looking legs. Somebody's will come out there and knock the hell out of people. So yeah, that's the kind of fullback I'm hoping to see the Saints find, and I don't know if they're going to be able to find them because they just don't seem to make those guys anymore. Yeah, right. I don't know about Carmichael, how he feels with the fullback. But I really, that's what I'm missing in this offense. So yeah, I have Dwayne Washington making the team because of special teams. And this is where the numbers game comes. Do you have 4 backs or do you have 5 backs? If you've got 4 backs, then you probably still have a fullback. If you go to 5, then you probably can squeeze a running back who can play fullback occasionally.
And again,
Yeah.
if they keep an Adam Prentice
Hmm.
or another fullback that they find, that this is the type of position that Sean Payton always got, poached from other teams' cuts. But if they keep an Adam Prentice, and I have little doubt that Abram Smith, Tony Jones, or Divine Ezigbo, one of those guys will be available to stash on
Hmm.
the practice squad. So again, you do have that backup plan if you can sneak any of these guys through waivers and bring them back on the practice squad.
Okay, so so we're looking at 4 or 5 running backs. So then the next question is receivers. How many receivers are you looking at keeping on this team? I know who you want to cut. You know.
Yeah, I'd pay the Saints to cut him.
Yeah.
Listen, and I've said it. Yeah, I said it on Facebook comment posts. I said it on this show. I've said it on other shows. You rarely see the Saints keep 6 active wide receivers. They usually stash 2 or 3 on a practice squad.
Hmm.
This is one of those years I think they do, but it's not going to be who you think it is. And this is why I went a little bit short on quarterbacks and potentially short on wide running backs. The wide receivers, I have them keeping Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, Deontay Hardy, all no-brainers. Marquez Callaway is my 5th one. And I think they cut Traquan Smith. And it's not just because of the joy it will bring me. I believe that 6th wide receiver will also have to be a guy that can play special teams, whether it's a return guy, a gunner, something like that. If they keep 6 wide receivers, it's only because of that. I still believe that either the Deontay Hardy, Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith, all 3 of those guys will not be on this team. One of them will be moved, whether it's by release or I wrote an article speculating that one of them could be traded. To me, Traquan Smith, as it stands right now, Traquan Smith is the odd man out, which means that, again, the back half, the 4 and 5 are going to be Deontay. He's your return guy. Callaway, he's your guy that was starting experience that could step up. And my 6th guy, I'm going to go a little bit of an upset here. Aesop Winston.
Okay.
He played pretty well. Yeah, he played pretty well in relief of Deontay last year. He can return kicks. He's big enough to play a special teams coverage role, and he's young enough to develop. But I agree with you, Calvin. I think of the 3 that I mentioned, Callaway also has the best trade value. But even if you could get a 6th or a 7th round pick for Traquan Smith based off of experience, I say you do it.
Well, I can't disagree with your 5, your top 5. Your 6th one, I think that's a position that's really up for grab. And Emmanuel Butler. That's your Andy Tanner. That's your Onome Ojo. I mean, that's just one of those players
Kirk Merritt.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't know what I think that battle is for that 6th spot. I really do. I think Rashid Shaheed is going to have to return at least 1 kick for a touchdown, preferably not in the last preseason game,
right?
To get a job. And then not only have to return 1 for a touchdown, he also has to show consistently on returns that he doesn't put the ball on the ground and he gets good yardage.
Yep.
That's how he could make the team.
And if that happens, all of a sudden, Mr. Deontay Hardy is expendable.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of these other ones that are on the team. Kawan Baker. Kirk Merritt, who we talked about before. It's hard because those are guys that I can see getting cut in the first couple weeks of training camp before we even see a preseason game.
Yeah.
Like a Jalen McCleskey. Somebody who really goes. And we're gonna talk about that right after we talk about the offensive line. But we'll talk one last thing because I know I gotta give Bob some more time to come up with another conspiracy theory involving Goodell. I just I don't know. I really don't know who could be that 6th receiver. So you're going to laugh at this one. If I'm going to put a name at the sixth receiver right now before camp starts, I'm going to put Kevin White in there. And I'm putting Kevin White in there because they brought him back. I think they want to see if they can do something with him with this new receiver coach.
Can see that.
Again, that could change dramatically come preseason. If he can't catch balls in the preseason, he's not making this team.
Right.
He's got to be able to show he can catch passes. But I do remember last year when he got brought back to this team, they said he was the only one like an NFL receiver out there based on the way he ran routes, the way he cut, and that kind of thing. So I can.
And he
see
was
them
getting
getting,
open. He just couldn't catch the damn ball.
No, and I think that's the issue. He's the problem with Hardy is this is my issue with him when people wanted to use him primarily as a starting receiver is he gets hurt way too easily because he is so small. And I'm like you, Calvin. I like him.
Oh, I love
him a lot. The two things I blame that Buccaneers playoff game loss on is Hardy getting knocked out of the game because the Bucs could not stop that man.
No,
they were terrified of him. He's running free and clear through that special teams all game, and of course Jared Cook fumbling. That's the two things I blame. I don't blame Drew Brees' interceptions. I don't even blame the injuries to Thomas and all the receivers. I blame Hardy getting knocked out of the game and Cook's fumble because either of those things happen. You win that game easily.
Yep.
I just want to see. I would like White to pan out. That's all I can say right now.
It'd be a nice story.
It would be, but I don't expect him to make the team.
No.
I'm just putting him in there. I'm penciling him in light colored pencil with the eraser in my hand because I think the sixth position is that fluid right now.
Same, I agree.
Okay, offensive lineman. That's pretty straightforward, and tight ends we'll finish with. But offensive lineman, that's pretty damn straightforward. We know who the starting five are going to be.
Yeah, with the exception of is Penning going to secure the job, or is it going to be her? So we basically know who the starting six are.
Six, yeah, I should say six. So the six. So you've got Ramczyk, Ruiz, who's on his last chance, McCoy, Pete, and Hurst/Penning. So there's your six. Who do you have at number 7?
To me, it's easy. It's Calvin Throckmorton. I think Throckmorton showed the coaches what he could do last year. He was arguably the team's most consistent lineman between if you combine health and performance. Because when Pete went down, obviously you're going to plug James Hurst in there. But then when they started losing Armstead and Ramczyk, you had to move Hurst outside. That means you had to go to Calvin Throckmorton. Throckmorton played far more heads and shoulders more consistently better than Cesar Ruiz. I don't see that changing. Throckmorton isn't the athlete that Hurst or Pete or even Ruiz theoretically are. So you downgrade a little bit there, but he controls the point of attack well. He could play either guard spot. I go number 7. Calvin Throckmorton.
How do you feel about Forrest Lamp and Landon Young? Well, first off, how many offensive linemen are you keeping?
You just named them. I think they keep 9. For sure. Okay. And I go with Lamp and Young. I know for a fact that the coaches love Landon Young, and he played pretty well in the preseason and reasonably well in that Philly game. His only significant offensive action before he got hurt. Forrest Lamp, he's a former second-round pick. He's only 29 years old. He's a guard who they've been cross-training at center. That's something to watch. And Lamp has starting experience. He's the kind of player that the Saints bring in from other teams, who's been a part-time starter that ends up sticking around, being very valuable. We've seen it with James Hurst. We saw it before that with the guy that Ruiz couldn't beat out, had to retire because of concussions. I forget his name. The former Viking.
Yeah, you're talking about oh hell.
I'm drawing a blank.
A second ago. Yeah. I can't believe I just drew a blank on this guy. I can picture him and everything. We signed him from the Vikings.
Yeah, he was the center until they drafted McCoy. And then Ruiz couldn't beat him out.
Right, he was the guard.
Damn, I can't think of his name.
Hang on a second, I'll tell you right now.
But yeah, him, Hurst, before that we've seen, other guys. It's that kind of guy, like I said, a part-time starter, starting experience veteran, that's still in his physical prime. That's why I think, Forrest Lamp sticks around. So yeah, I think they easily keep 9 linemen, with Hurst, Throckmorton, Landon Young, and Forrest Lamp being the depth. But watch out for Ethan Greenidge too.
Nick Easton.
Yes,
Nick Easton,
that's the one.
who you're thinking of, Nick Easton. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. I think they keep 9 offensive linemen. They'll probably piss me off and do 8, but I think they keep 9 because I think they see a lot of development in Landon Young. I think they see some potential in Forrest Lamp. I think the battle really is between Throckmorton and Lamp to see if they do 8. If they do 8, where does it go? Because you've got 5 starters now. We're talking about 4 backups. One of them, they know that Hurst can play guard and tackle, and he can play both sides. If Penning, if Trevor Penning can become the starter, okay, now it makes it harder to keep multiple guys who can play multiple positions, because now Landon Young's position is really threatened in that scenario.
Yeah,
they could try and put Young on the practice squad and fool with him, try and develop him there. They know Ruiz and Pete both are inconsistent / injury prone. So how long do they stay out there as starters? So you're going to want to keep Lamp for sure.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a numbers game again. So I'm for the first time, I think the second team offensive line, depending on who makes it, could be almost as good as the starting offensive line. You won't see that huge drop off when the players start rotating in those preseason games. Yeah. 9 for Pete's future injury. Yeah, I agree. And at what point, I know Doug Marrone is supposed to be working for the team, as to his job is to develop Ruiz, but at one point does have that Sean Payton moment? Does Dennis Allen have that Sean Payton, Charles Brown moment where I've seen enough, And I think that's the real challenge on this unit. That's why I think you do keep 9, because at some point you're going to have to replace one or both guards. What Anna's behind? So I wonder if she just Googled what we were talking about. Could be Randolph Hurst, but I don't know. I don't know Randolph Hurst. Anyway, so the last one is tight ends. I've got 4. I figure you probably have 4 as well. Who do you have as your tight ends?
Yeah, I do have 4, and again, this is one of the reasons for the shortages at quarterback and running back. Because Adam Troutman is your starter by default, and I don't say that with any glee whatsoever. Taysom Hill is a listed tight end, but he's gonna be used out of the backfield, out of the slot as an H-back in that wildcat role. After that, I still think there's good potential for Juwan Johnson as a pass catcher. But again, Troutman's your starter by default. Taysom in tight end, name only. After that, I'm waiting to see if one of these guys, and Lucas Krull is everybody's favorite bingo card right now. Does Lucas Krull have enough ability to supplant an established veteran like Nick Vanette? Does he have enough pass catching ability to surpass Juwan Johnson? I'd like to see it happen, mainly because I hate this tight end group. But I don't see it. I think it's a no-brainer here. I think unless Krull shocks people, it's going to be Troutman, Taysom, Juwan, and Vanette.
Yeah. Especially because you've got to figure out if one day we're gonna have to just sit and talk about Krull, just so I have an excuse as the picture for this week's episode is going to be that damn multi-bladed spinning thing that he used to use, that weapon he used to use. I'll just get Krull with that logo. My brother has been putting up on Facebook. He's been putting up all the famous movies that came out in 1982. So it's 30 years ago. And, it's rather impressive, the movies that came out, E.T., Poltergeist, what was the ones he had? The Thing, just
those are the three that I remember off the top of my head.
Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan. That was
came out that year?
82, yeah. That movie saved the franchise too, because the Star Trek, the motion picture, only came out because of Star Wars. And I think I've talked about this on the show. Star Wars changed everything, so everybody was looking for a Star Wars kind of movie. So Paramount came out with Battlestar Galactica. Not Paramount. I'm sorry. Universal came out with Battlestar Galactica. And Paramount dug out. Disney pulled out the black hole in '79, and Paramount dug up Star Trek, because they were planning on doing a second TV show called Phase 2, and that kind of bombed. I've seen the test footage, and it looked bad. It like every '70s science fiction show you've ever seen. Just cheesy costumes, terrible background music. It looks terrible. So in fact, one of the characters in the if you go back and watch, they got the director's cut of the movie on Paramount Plus, right? Not Paramount. Yeah, Paramount Plus. I was watching the director's cut with enhanced special effects and everything else like that. But some of the actors who were supposed to be in the Star Trek Phase 2 appear in the space station that V'ger converts to data with his weapon. But anyway, if you look up Star Trek Phase 2, they've got the test shots from that thing, and it's hokey. It looks bad. It's going to it makes the original series like a landmark of special effects and technology that's, compared to the '70s. So, yeah. And that was the thing. So you had a lot of movies come out in '82. Then it seemed like everybody just kind of figured out what was the best movies to start making, and you saw some classics come out in that era. And next year will be 30 years since my favorite Stephen King movie that wasn't on television, because The Stand is the best Stephen King movie. The original Stand will forever for me to be the best Stephen King movie. But my favorite Stephen King movie on the screen is Christine, and that's 30 years.
That was a good one.
I love everything about that movie. And I don't know what it is, because it's hokey. Well, first I was in love with that girl. So I mean, she was just
formative years.
Oh yeah. That 83. I was what, 15 in 83, 16. Yeah, 15 turning 16. So yeah, that was the sweet spot to see an attractive girl in a movie. Oh no. No, 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 no. We're not doing this.
First of all, let's not jump off of the rails, but I hope you're wrong, Calvin.
You cannot make. I've gone on Schwarzenegger binge film,
Yeah.
binge movies. Oh, Terminator 2. Terminator came out in 83.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, 82, 82. So the original Terminator. So yeah, it's just just a lot of great movies that came out around that time. But anyway, no, you can't mess up Predator. You cannot do Predator wrong. I mean, Predator. I don't even watch the second Predator movie because you can't. The first one was just my favorite. It was one of my favorite science fiction movies. So anyway, I forgot where I was going with all this. I started talking about movies in the year. I really did. I've completely lost my train of thought. We went from tight ends to talk about movies, and I don't know where I was going with any of this.
Crawl was the link.
Yes, it was. Crawl was the link. Okay. That's what Anna looked at. Bob Crane and Hogan's Heroes. Yeah. And she looked up, she Googled Gus. Okay, that's where again. Yes.
Okay.
Bob Crane, we won't talk about his shall we say proclivities, but they do think that's one of the reasons why he was found dead. He was beaten to death, and no one knows why. He was found dead not long after that movie Gus came out, and it was just something unusual about him, and that's all. We'll leave it at that. I mean, you can look up Bob Crane death you can Google that. I do remember the other thing I was going to with movies. So going back to I think it was Jimmy's question. I have to scroll back. Wow, it was a while back. Okay. I don't remember who asked the question, but they asked, here we go. Warriors come out to play. I watched that on HBO. So that's how I know that movie. And it was on all the time, like Clash of the Titans. So the question was, do you think Roger Goodell will go easier on the Saints now that Sean Payton is gone? Because it was Sean Payton that was the antagonist for Goodell. Do you believe that's the case, or do you think it's just a knock on the Saints?
I think the original I have no doubt that the original antagonist was Sean Payton, but the players still remain, the ownership group still remain, the foundation still remains. So until the real man who gave up West Point to the British, Roger Goodell.
My God.
Say, this is what I think about when you guys go off of the rails and I can't join you. I think of ways to disparage Roger Goodell, but until he goes easy on them, or I'm not even going to say easy. I'm going to say fair. Until he treats the Saints fairly, I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, it's a shame Sean Payton did not win another Super Bowl where Roger Goodell had to hand him another trophy, because I would have given anything to have Sean Payton address Roger Goodell in this manner. That he just say his name is Maximus Decimus Medicius. Maximus. I knew I was going to butcher this damn thing. Maximus Decimus Mardicius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legion, loyal servant to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. Just when Jim Nance hands in that microphone, he just says that. That would be great. That would be great. I apologize for butchering his name. I've only watched Gladiator about 1,000 times, so, and that's just one of my favorite scenes. Um, anyway, I know we were trying to keep it short, but we always manage to go 20 minutes over once we get off the rails and go into movies and television. Thank all you guys for joining us, and thank you for yeah, Anna's pulling up quotes from In Living Color. That's how far back she is on the show. Thank you as always for joining us.
Yes.
And this is what happens in the summertime when we got very little to talk about. We're gonna go off the rails very easily. Next week we'll try and talk about the defense. Because there's some question marks there when we get to the secondary. Who's going to make this team? So that's something to think about. In the meantime, let's just keep having quiet Saints news all week, and so we have very little to talk about next week, other than In Living Color and movies, and probably music. In the meantime, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.